East Lake Fire Rescue and Florida Highway Patrol both confirmed to us that one person is dead following a fire here at this gas station just off of East Lake Road in Palm Harbor. Officials say they were actually called to the scene after multiple reports of a structure fire and explosions here at the Circle K Shell gas station just after 2 o'clock this afternoon. And witnesses nearby actually tell me there was one initial explosion followed by about 2 to 3 more before there was a large plume of white smoke that they saw coming from the vehicle. Leaders here at the city of Tampa and Hillsborough County are opening new COVID testing sites in order to combat the high number of cases that you just talked about, as well as that high demand for testing. And one of those locations is right here in West Tampa at Al Lopez Park, where Mayor Jane Castor says it will open for testing beginning on Friday.
Yeah, Jameson, I was just standing here like all the other fans in Thunder Alley, getting ready for the second overtime to start. Little did I know that lightning would strike at the end of the first overtime and they would send the series back for a Game 7 to Toronto. Kevin just outlined the roller coaster that this Game 6 was, and it was a roller coaster for fans as well. They were up on their feet cheering in period 2 when the Lightning took 2-0 goal lead, but the ambush came from the Leafs. They scored 3 straight goals, 2 at the end of the second period, stealing all the momentum that Kevin just talked about.
What kind of security are you seeing in that area around you?
Well, it is pretty heavily secure. On both ends, we have tape, as you saw, on the south end of Greenwood, and on the north end, we've got a security tent where they are checking every vehicle that comes through. But I will tell you, honestly, there are a lot of people here who really could just walk in from the OSU Tulsa area. Yeah, Karen, as you said, the president arrived here at the Greenwood Cultural Center just before 2 o'clock this afternoon to hundreds of people lined outside on Greenwood Avenue. As he came here, he spoke to the remaining 3 survivors of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre and a lot of descendants of those victims. Well, Karen, right now, as you said, it's a fluid situation as there are several crews around Mays County and beyond who are out here trying to get to both of those out-of-state contractors who are still stuck down inside of the dam. Now, a spokesperson with the GRDA tells us that around 6 o'clock this evening, 3 contractors were actually doing some routine core drilling down inside of the dam when there was an explosion.
According to City Attorney David O'Milia, the law right now says that you can only paint on a city street in reasons of safety, and that allowing the BLM mural to stay here in Greenwood would allow anyone to paint on any city street anywhere. Councilor McKee tells me that interpretation of the law could be painted over soon. One of those operations actually broke out their wallets and spent 7 to 8 times the going rate per acreage here in the county. He says they bought a 20-acre property for $700,000, which equates to $38,500 per acre, when the going rate here in Okmulgee County is just $5,000 per acre. Business owners operating by the book say it's hard enough to try to turn a profit in this market, and having to battle against the black market makes it near impossible.
Missing posters of 34-year-old Kathleen Moore posted across the street from the Walgreens where her phone was found in a dumpster earlier this week. Again, Saturday night, detectives searched the area and came away with what appears to be a bag of evidence.
New rent report shows monthly living costs in Tampa Bay are up 42% compared to last March.
Bay Area renters are being put out on the street without an affordable living option to turn to. For a small group of women in Tampa, it's the return to a past they've worked so hard to escape from. ABC Action News in-depth reporter Mason Mauro shows us how rent prices are re-victimizing women who fell prey to trafficking.
I'm going to be honest, I just feel like I'm stuck. I feel like I'm stuck.
Stuck in the inescapable situation she clawed out of just 3 years ago.
How am I supposed to live life right and be on the right track and stay out of this messed up cycle when it's just so impossible?
Jasmine Barner was pulled into the dark world of trafficking as a teenager.
Age 13, I was dealing with mental health and then, of course, drugs. And I started, selling my body to make money. At first, it was just a hustle. It was a way to make quick money. But then after that, it was my way of surviving.
Barner opened up to me about her troubled past with drug addiction, sex trafficking, jail time, losing custody of her kids, a life she forced herself out of for the sake of her 4 young girls.
I can't let them see how hard this really is, because then it's so easy to just be vulnerable and just get sucked into the wrong choices.
After working the Tampa streets for 6 years, falling in and out of drug recovery programs, Barner found help through an organization called Created in 2019.
I went into the house with 2 garbage bags of clothes. That was what I owned.
We're just trying to meet those who may be experiencing trafficking and exploitation, offering gifts, offering resources, letting them know that there are ways that they can exit.
Jillian Penhale is the executive director at Created. Penhale and her team reach out to vulnerable women on the street and provide them a safe haven, a sense of security.
Help them go through the stages of healing and recovery in order to exit and hopefully achieve stable income, stable housing, and just a new future for themselves.
After a year with Created, Barner graduated from the program and nabbed a full-time job, beginning to build that new life for her family.
They taught me how to live my life.
But after just 2 years of progress, she's afraid it's all coming down.
It feels like I'm just being re-victimized over and over again.
Barner had her 4th girl, Nia Lee, 8 months ago, and when her family grew, she knew her home had to grow along with it.
I have to go to a 3-bedroom.
According to the latest rent report by Zumper, the average cost of a 3-bed in Tampa is nearly $2,400. Barner says she can't find anything under $2,000.
I can't afford these places.
To make things worse for Barner, she says every landlord she spoke with requires proof of income 3 times the monthly rent. Barner brings in anywhere from $800 to $1,200 a paycheck.
I'm a single mom. I have 4 girls, and it's hard. I bust my every day, but I don't make that kind of money.
Barner's worst fear is she winds up right where she started, back on the street, and she wouldn't be alone.
We've seen a major increase in the amount of women that we're serving.
Penhale says her Created team is finding double the amount of women trafficking during its weekly outreach. Even more are stopping by the drop-in center. One woman in Created's recovery program, Penhale says, went back to sex work after her apartment simply became too expensive.
Her rent was raised by almost $500 a month. And when that happened, her immediate thought was like, oh, I'm gonna have to go back out on the street.
With evictions up in March and affordable housing hard to come by, Barner has 1 month to find a new home before her old one beckons her back.
I know that I have not come this far to be on the streets with my 4 kids. You know what I mean? So I know that something is going to happen, but I just can't see it yet.
When we pass on, our lives are memorialized at the graves where we're buried, but many people in Tampa Bay never got that recognition.
That's right. In St. Petersburg, some families cannot visit their descendants' burial sites because their graves are not marked. In fact, there are no signs of 3 cemeteries near Tropicana Field ever existing.
In-depth reporter Mason Mauro went through the archives and spoke with family members to share the story and the known history of those abandoned cemeteries.
Home of the Rays, in the final resting site for hundreds in St. Petersburg.
I might descend from someone who was buried in the cemetery.
A resting site now covered by concrete. The only markings are Lot 1 and Lot 2 reserved for fans visiting the ballpark.
It wasn't just my family that was buried in the cemetery. Hundreds of other folks were buried in these cemeteries.
This is Corey Givens Jr. He believes his great-great-grandfather and great-great-aunt are both buried under the I-175 bridge that crosses over 16th Street South.
Right over here to our left, this is west of the overpass. This is what we believe was Evergreen Cemetery. This was a majority black cemetery.
A family Bible passed down to him from his grandmother 2 years ago shows his ancestors were buried at Evergreen Cemetery, 6 feet under earth, illegally bulldozed more than 70 years ago.
It was not unusual to build right on top of black cemeteries.
Pastor Clarence Williams' Greater Mount Zion AME Church sits just 4 blocks from the erased cemeteries. He's fought for years to right the wrongs made decades ago and give those families some clarity.
If we have the right support, the documentation, the historical facts of these cemeteries, really deserve for us to treat them in a certain way.
Detailed research of the cemeteries collected and published by the city of St. Petersburg resurrects their forgotten history.
There was Oaklawn Cemetery, Evergreen Cemetery, Moffett Cemetery.
Known record of the trio dates back to 1888, when Moffett Cemetery, also known as the Negro Cemetery, was dedicated to soldiers who fought in America's Civil War. In 1925, an ordinance prohibited further burials at the cemeteries, so the city could extend Fifth Avenue south through Evergreen and Moffett. In 1926, an article published in the St. Petersburg Times reports more than 50 bodies were moved from Moffett to what is now Lincoln Cemetery in St. Petersburg, but it's still unclear if any were left behind.
All we want are answers. That's all we want are answers.
Land developers desecrated unmarked graves at Old Oaklawn Cemetery in 1945 to make way for a new apartment complex. An article written at the time says, quote, gravestones were uprooted and sites obliterated by bulldozers.
People did what they wanted with those sites.
Dr. Antoinette Jackson is an anthropologist at the University of South Florida and member of Florida's Abandoned African American Cemeteries Task Force. She helped survey the cemeteries soon after that task force was formed last summer.
What we're really talking about is a systemic issue that was beyond abandoned. These were deliberately, marginalized or erased, or in some cases actually stolen or ignored.
In July, penetrating radar detected 3 graves where Oaklawn Cemetery once was. Givens Jr. is still waiting for a detailed look under that bridge where he believes his ancestors still lie.
The folks who were disrespected in life, and here they are being disrespected in death.
It's right across from the baseball field here. A lot of fans cheering and things when games are going on, but you come down here, I would assume it's a much more different feeling, right?
Yeah, when I come down here and sit in my car, I come down here and it's a somber feeling. I literally just sit here and I soak up the spirit of the ancestors. It's almost like they're talking to me and they're encouraging me to keep pressing forward and fight on and do the right thing.